Starlink is very good if you've no internet access. If you have an existing fiber line or an existing really good 4G, 5G, then you don't need Starlink. But if you are living in an area that has absolutely no coverage, then Starlink is far, far better than the original geostationary satellite dishes. Starlink offers better speeds and lower latency. The only slight downside is that the upload speeds on Starlink is pretty much what you see in 4G. It's about 20 megabits per second. So if you are a company that uploads massive amounts of data, a Starlink connection may need to be aggregated amongst something else to get the sort of bandwidth you need. But for most people, Starlink is very good. Now, the reason why your port forwards don't work in Starlink is because Starlink uses a technology called carrier NAT. And carrier NAT means that your port forwards are set up in their data centers and their ground stations. It's not set up with the Starlink router. This means that you can't set up a port forward. The only way you're going to get access to your cameras is either by having a VPN from the site back into a server in AWS or something like that, and then you connect that server, or by buying an iSpy or i-ctrl from Netcelero. The other thing to be aware of in Starlink is Starlink does TCP acceleration. What this means is that it essentially sends back the sync packets to your software before it even gets to the far end. This speeds up the handshake between two endpoints, but can also have an effect on certain types of technology, and it can create some weird sort of timeouts and things like that. The i-ctrl basically passes your traffic end to end, doesn't run a TCP proxy, bypasses all that. So if you're having a particular issue with a TCP based technology and you're not sure why, it is quite possibly it's how the TCP acceleration works. I've seen it affect some types of FTP transfers, but there are other kind of more bespoke solutions and technologies that might give issues with. The other one I've seen it with issues with it is on UDP. So a lot of VoIP companies use UDP keep alives to keep the UDP port open. Now this works fine on a home router where a UDP port will stay open typically for up to 300 seconds. On the Starlink system, it's shorter than that, which means that if your keep alives aren't fast enough, you end up basically losing that connection. So your phones drop off and they don't ring. And that can be seen as whereas you're sitting in the office, a call comes in and you're expecting 5 phones to ring, but only 3 of them ring, or only 1 of them ring, and it varies continuously. And that's because it just happens where you catch it in the keep alive. Again, the i-ctrl basically passes the packets out in full. Your states for UDP last over 300 seconds. We can extend that if needs be, but 300 is loads. And you're coming from a fixed IP address, so you're able to lock down the inbound SIP connections to that IP address. So Starlink is a great technology, but it's more similar to 4G and 5G networks as opposed to being more similar to a fiber network you would have to your house where you'd have the IP at the premises, or you be able to get a static. So there's no sign Starlink will offer static IPs, but the way it looks like they've set up their IPv4 network, they never will. They are talking about offering IPv6 as static, but that's sometimes next year. IPv6 can work, but for a lot of people, their technology they're trying to connect to remotely doesn't support IPv6. So if you have Starlink and you're having issues with particular software, before you throw it out, have a chat with us because the i-ctrl might be able to help.